visiting. Within the hour, they'd landed.
The world found out about it rather hurriedly. What do we read into what's happened?
We read into it that North Korea wants a closer relationship. They have been assiduous in recent weeks in touring various capitals, seeking investment, talking to business leaders from various countries, saying, for example, that they want European investment in an industrial area which is just inside North Korea but which contains South Korean companies. That area has let it be known that it wants European companies as well. So it wants a change in the relationship is the nub of it all.
And this is a visible show of the North Korean leadership minus the North Korean leader. Now, what's going on with him? Hasn't been seen for a month.
We don't know, and that's the truth of the matter. He was last seen in a concert in Pyongyang exactly a month ago, and before that he was seen on television. Waddling is the right word, certainly limping very heavily and on alternate legs. The North Korean media, state-run media, has since said that he was suffering discomfort and he's ill. But it prompts the question, if they are admitting that, how ill is he? So you then ask, well, what's actually going on? And you can read that any way you like, frankly. You could say this high-level delegation indicates that maybe he's lost power, but that's not been admitted. That seems to me to be fanciful and highly unlikely. A much more likely reading is that he retains power, whether on his sick bed or simply away from cameras, and he has dictated that this deputation should happen.
That's Steve Evans, our correspondent in Seoul. Now, you'd think a campaign to eradicate polio would be welcomed pretty much anywhere, not in Pakistan though, where immunisation teams have been attacked, even killed. The campaign's now suffered another setback, with more than 200 new cases being recorded so far this year, the highest figure since records began. Let's catch up with our correspondent Shaima Halil, who's in Islamabad. Tell us a bit more about how bad these figures are, Shaima.
Well, they're quite bad, Andrew, if you consider the fact that this was a country that were on an all-time low. Just in 2005, it was just 28 cases back then, but since the turn of the millennium, this is the worst number, the highest number of cases of polio. That's 202. Now, most of these cases have been recorded in the northwest tribal regions, and these are the areas where almost no polio vaccination has been administered for 2 years now, and this is because of a ban that was imposed by the Taliban because of drone strikes. They basically said that they could allow polio vaccinations if the Americans stopped drone strikes. But also remember, this was after 2011, when a fake vaccination campaign has helped the Americans to track down and kill Osama bin Laden, and since then no polio campaigning, no polio vaccinations have been able to happen in these areas, which are now considered the hub of this crippling disease in the country.
Pretty embarrassing for the government in Islamabad when Pakistan's one of 3 countries in the world which has this kind of problem with polio.
Oh, absolutely. And you can argue that of these 3 countries, Pakistan is the worst. The government, like you say, is quite embarrassed. They are under a lot of pressure. They're seen as having failed to eradicate this disease when most of the countries in the world have. And remember, there are many, many millions of dollars that have been donated to Pakistan to curb polio, to put an end to it, but they basically haven't been able to do it. And you speak to the government officials, to health officials, and they say, look, we haven't been able to do it because of militancy, because these are areas that are controlled by Islamic militants who simply won't allow it to happen. And when families do immunize their children, they're either threatened or attacked. And remember, there are reports of about 60 or so health workers that have been killed, and security personnel who have helped them also been killed. So there are many, many threats to people who administer this, and this is why it's very hard to put an end to it here.
Shaima, thank you very much indeed for that. Shaima Halil with us from Pakistan on the BBC World Service, where Kathy has more of the world news for you.
A federal judge in the United States has ordered the release of 28 videotapes showing a Guantanamo Bay prisoner who's on hunger strike being force-fed. Lawyers for the prisoner, Abu Wail Diab, say the ruling will enable the American people to see that human rights abuses are being committed at Guantanamo. The US government had asked for the tapes to remain secret. Thousands of Venezuelans have paid their last respects to the young governing party lawmaker Robert Serra, who was murdered at his home on Wednesday, along with his partner Maria Herrera. President Nicolas Maduro joined a procession that accompanied the coffins through the streets of Caracas. He said the killers had already been identified. And security officials in Washington say they're confident that health checks at airports in West Africa will prevent more people with Ebola travelling to the US. A White House advisor has rejected calls for a travel ban.
Thanks, Kathy. The Bible speaks of beating swords into ploughshares. In one part of California, though, they have a different twist. They're whipping toy guns into ice cream. Alistair Leithhead in Los Angeles has the scoop.
A majority of Americans support their constitutional right to bear arms, and any efforts to restrict weapons, however powerful, quickly become a political hot potato. But given the choice between toy guns and ice cream, the district attorney in Marin County, just north of San Francisco, is hoping kids will think with their stomachs. Plastic firearms or violent video games can be swapped for a cone and a scoop as part of a campaign against domestic violence. Its impact may be limited in all but a small pocket of California, as many children in the US are often given real guns at a very early age. Recently, a 9-year-old girl accidentally killed her shooting instructor as she fired an Uzi submachine gun at a range in Arizona. Trading weapons isn't a new idea. Every year in Los Angeles, the police buy back real guns for cash and take some of the weapons off the streets in a place which has historically a much reduced, if still high, level of gun crime.
Alistair Leithhead in Los Angeles. More on today's breaking stories with Julian Marshall coming up with News Hour at 12 hours GMT here on the BBC World Service. But from me, Andrew Peach, thanks for being with me here in the newsroom.
Distribution of the BBC World Service in the United States is made possible by American Public Media, producer and distributor of award-winning public radio content designed to engage, inform, and entertain. Delivering the BBC World Service, helping Americans navigate the world around them by bringing world events, cultures, and issues into focus. That's APM, American Public Media.
The candidates in the ultra-competitive 6th Congressional District in suburban Denver both want to boost the local economy, but cite different paths.
I've certainly worked in strengthening our aerospace industry to create jobs in that sector, which is very important to this district.
That's Republican Mike Kaufman. As for Democrat Andrew Romanoff,
we ought to raise the minimum wage. So if you're willing to work hard, you don't have to live in poverty.
Hear them Tuesday on CPR's Colorado Matters.
BBC World Service, welcome to the Y Factor. Today, that strange thing, charisma. What is it? Where does it come from? Is it built into a few individuals, or can anyone learn it? Charisma originates in religion. The word means divine gift, but is it a gift, or perhaps a curse? It's a powerful thing used for great good, and great evil too. I'm Mike Williams. I'll be back after the news.
BBC News with Kathy Clugston. The man seen as the second most powerful leader in North Korea, Hwang Pyong-so, has travelled to South Korea for talks, thought to be the highest level discussions between the two countries for 5 years. They've agreed to hold talks again within the next few weeks. It comes amid speculation about the health of North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un, who hasn't been seen in public for a month. The authorities in Hong Kong have denied allegations that they allowed criminal gangs to attack pro-democracy protesters. The police say a number of people arrested in violent clashes could be members of triad gangs, but the territory's security chief said rumours linking the government to organised crime were unfair. Britain has called the murder of Alan Henning by Islamic State militants abhorrent and senseless. The Prime Minister David Cameron said London would use all its assets to find the killers of the aid worker from Northern England. Reports from Syria speak of continued heavy fighting around the Kurdish border town of Kobani, besieged by IS militants. Activists say dozens of shells have fallen in the town, while the US-led coalition has carried out airstrikes against IS positions. Health officials in Pakistan say the number of polio cases has reached its highest level for 15 years, with more than 200 cases in 2014. The vaccination program has suffered from attacks by Taliban militants. Reports from eastern Ukraine say fighting is continuing in the city of Donetsk. The city council said bursts of heavy artillery could be heard in several western regions. Despite a ceasefire signed last month, Ukrainian government and rebel pro-Russian forces have been locked in a battle for control of the airport. Campaigners are organising protests around the world to highlight the dangers facing elephants and rhinos. They say that the current rates of poaching mean that both species could become extinct within 20 years. BBC News.
BBC World Service. I'm Mike Williams. Today on the Y Factor, the wow factor, that peculiar characteristic we call charisma.
Charisma essentially is that quality that
and he's talking about the theories of one of the founding fathers of sociology, the German Max Weber.
If you think about why people follow other people without being forced to, you can think of three basic ways that that happens. One was that they occupied some traditional role, like being a father or a mother or a priest or a coach. One was that they were legally and rationally entitled to be followed. They were a president or the head of some elected body or something like that. And the third way was sort of charismatic, that there was a certain quality of individual personality where somebody was kind of set apart from ordinary people and they were seen as being endowed with something exceptional. Now what that was could vary depending on the circumstances. What was important about it was that people recognized it as something that wasn't accessible to ordinary people and that it drove the charismatic individual and people wanted to follow them on that basis.
Hi, my name is Olivia Fox. I'm a chief charisma coach, which essentially means that I took charisma apart from the science perspective.
Olivia is author of The Charisma Myth. She believes it can be taught, and that's what she does in university classrooms and company boardrooms.
Charisma breaks down into three series of components. One is presence, and presence simply means being present right now in the moment. Especially in this day and age, so few people are really present in the conversation that if you can increase your level of presence, you've instantly won major charisma points. The second category of behaviors is power. And let's be clear, power is not the actual power you wield. It's rather our perception of your ability to influence the world around you.
And the third?
Warmth. And warmth is one behavior that cannot be faked.
My name's Clifford Fleming, and I am the National Young Greens co-chair. I'm 22, nearly 23.
He's a political activist in the UK, an aspiring politician, and he took a look for us at Olivia's self-help book.
I would say that I probably have some charisma. So a few things I'm going to try out from the charisma myth include when listening, I'm going to reduce my nodding. I'm going to pause after someone speaks for 2 seconds. When I'm feeling nervous, I'm going to pretend someone that I respect is giving me advice, and I'm going to imagine being hugged when I'm nervous.
You can learn how to become a better public speaker, or you can learn how to become more relaxed around other people, or speak in a confident tone of voice and so on. And those things can certainly be taught to some degree. But the sort of charisma and charismatic qualities that the sociologist Max Weber had in mind were generally things that, at the level of the person themselves, they were really gripped by. They had some mission in life, or they had some project that they really wanted to implement, and they were driven by that internally. And so that was something that you either had or hadn't.
In serving, we recognize a simple but powerful truth. We need each other, and we must care for one another.
My tenure at the White House unfortunately coincided with an episode that we call L'Affaire Monique, the Monica Lewinsky business.
Mike McCurry was the White House press secretary during the Clinton administration.
In the immediate aftermath of that story coming to public light, Bill Clinton marched in front of the United States Congress for the annual State of the Union address, which every president gives to report on the condition that America is in. And under what were terribly awkward circumstances in 1998, he gave a speech that really, was charismatic in all of its wonderful aspects.
These are good times for America. We have more than 14 million new jobs, the lowest unemployment in 24 years, the lowest co-inflation in 30 years. Our leadership in the world is unrivaled. Ladies and gentlemen, the state of our union is strong.
He connected with an audience both inside the Congress, the members of the Congress who were assembled, but I think also the outside American public, because, you know, in some ways they saw him as the sinners that we all are, and then he overcame.
The word charisma has religious roots. It comes to us from the Greek through ecclesiastical Latin, and originally it meant divine gift or grace. It's been a feature of many religious leaders throughout history, from fringe cults to the mainstream faiths followed by millions. David Willey has lived in Rome for more than 40 years and is the BBC's correspondent at the Vatican. He's seen two popes who he believes were charismatic, but in very different ways.
John Paul II, I got to know him quite well going around the world with him. He had this power of attracting attention. Of course, he had a wonderful gimmick in the early days of his travels. He used to step down the stairs of the plane and immediately fall on his knees and kiss the ground, and that seemed to endear him to people. And then I think he had a very easy relationship with people. You felt when you were with him that he was giving you his entire attention. People like that.
Did you feel his charisma?
He hugged me once. I didn't know quite what to do. Yes.
It's not often you're hugged by a pope.
Not really.
You said there were two popes that you felt had great charisma.
Well then, of course, the current Pope Francis is, he's very charismatic. He's very different to Pope John Paul. His charisma began the very moment when he appeared before the crowds in St. Peter's Square.
Fratelli e sorelle, buonasera. Voi sapete?
Pope Francis just looked rather perplexed and said, "Listen, I come from a very faraway place, and you better pray for me." And he bowed his head. His humility and his openness shone forth, as it were, from the very first moment.
An interesting combination of words, charisma and humility. It rather goes against the popular idea of charisma somehow being linked with dominance and with power.
Charismatic leadership is utterly amoral. There's no sense when you describe someone as a charismatic leader that you're saying that they're an admirable leader. You're describing a form of leadership, and therefore we say the charismatic leader by definition has charisma, but we're not saying in that we admire them in any way. We're simply describing it as a form of leadership based on this charismatic presence.
Lawrence Rees is an historian and author of a book called The Dark Charisma of Adolf Hitler.
Der Völkerstreit oder Hass untereinander, der wird gepflegt von ganz bestimmten Interessenten.
Hitler's personality does not change massively throughout his life. He is a very, very strange individual. He doesn't listen to the views of anybody else. He lectures people. He's utterly certain in his views about things. He's massively overconfident. Now suddenly people think this is an extraordinary human being. What's changed is them. What's changed is the audience are now looking for someone who has certainty, who has absolute sure beliefs, somebody who they feel this incredible connection with, because as someone wrote at the time, he seemed to be expressing what was within us all. It's in the nature of that connection that charisma exists.
People had to be willing to follow you, so there's a sort of relational quality to charisma that goes beyond just something that you can cultivate as a matter of personality. So it's more than just what you're like as an individual. What also matters is that people want someone to lead them and choose you to follow them. It's a two-way relationship.
Should we aspire to be charismatic?
Charisma, of course, superficially seems very attractive in the short run because people follow you, but one of the features of it as a mode of leadership is that it's very unstable. From the inside, charismatic leadership is often kind of painful for the leader. Take the case of Steve Jobs, for example. He was somebody who, by all accounts, felt kind of personally pained by failures of his employees, products that were unpleasant to use, he was made physically sick by. And then for the followers, it can also be quite unpleasant because charismatic leadership is often capricious and it's unforgiving, it's organizationally sort of flat and extremely demanding.
I mean, everybody thinks they want charisma. Well, Charismatic leadership is as Weber tells us, is a fundamentally unstable form of leadership. It's unstable because it relies almost exclusively on success. That's because if you give your trust to a charismatic leader, you're giving your trust to a charismatic leader because first and foremost you feel this connection to them, and you feel coming from them, and this is a quality I think all charismatic leaders have, is certainty. A charismatic leader is certain. Well, that's all well and good until your certainty is proved wrong. Well, a charismatic leader will face destruction of their charisma because of something like that, which is that you've promised something, you've said it with certainty, and the reverse has happened.
I'm thinking about cult leadership here. The charismatic leadership of a religious cult is one that fails when the promise itself is no longer delivered. We've seen over history many examples of the faithful waiting on a mountaintop to be taken up to heaven or picked up by the aliens. When that promise is not fulfilled, is that the end of that charismatic leadership?
It usually is, and that's one of the reasons that small charismatic and especially religious organizations often end in catastrophe. There are very few second acts amongst charismatic leaders, although they sometimes keep trying. And this comes back to the kind of relational quality of charisma. If people choose to follow you, they see something in your inner drive and the thing that you are promising them, it's very important that the charismatic leader be able to deliver on that promise in a way that makes sense to the followers. Charisma is not just a matter of personality, because it can be withdrawn from the person when people choose no longer to follow them.
The demanding life of a charismatic leader isn't something that many of us will have to worry about. The London-based psychotherapist Nicole Gale believes the trait is rare and innate, something we're born with, not something that truly can be learnt.
I think people are who they are, and they express that in the way that they engage with others and the way that they engage in the world. But I don't feel that reading a book or learning a few techniques is going to change the way that a person is. In my opinion, these are tricks. These are skills, this is acting. And I think to some people can pull off acting better than others, but essentially it can come across as really insincere. Nodding your head, using someone's name in a sentence so many times, touching someone on the arm. In my opinion, it's just a trick.
If charisma is innate, when does it first manifest itself? From the cradle?
I don't know about from the cradle, but I think if you observe sort of kids on a playground, there's always going to be a leader. There's going to be one kid that everyone's following around.
You cannot turn someone into something they're not.
Mike McCurry again.
There is a quality of charisma that depends on authenticity and the genuine reflection of how you put yourself out in front of the public and then connect with other people. Because you can turn yourself in and try to present yourself on a public stage that doesn't really reflect who you really are. And I think that's a very, very dangerous thing.
The hardest thing for a captain is it's not when the team is doing well, it's when it's doing badly.
If charisma is innate, is it transferable? Can a charismatic sportsman like Imran Khan become a charismatic politician?
And so I just told them that, listen, just be as if, you're a cornered tiger. You've got nowhere to go.
Imran Khan was Pakistan's most successful cricket captain, and when he retired from the sport, he entered politics. He's now a member of the National Assembly and president of the opposition party Tehreek-e-Insaf, the Movement for Justice.
Just go and fight and really burn.
The Pakistani journalist Fareshte Ghati has long followed his career.
He dominated that team completely, to the extent of telling each guy what he should wear, whether it's a long sleeve sweater or a short sleeve one, what he should eat, how long he should sleep. He dictated everything in that team, and he just had to, because there were a bunch of really young guys who needed that kind of guidance and coaching and almost parenting. It's also the opposition. I've seen plenty of seasoned cricket captains worrying in the bar the night before, what's Imran going to do? So he had that kind of overarching aura.
He was idolised as captain of the national cricket team, but he's discovering that politics is a very different game.
His charisma is one that is across genders. I can see men being equally mesmerized as the ladies. But I think he had more of a charisma then. A sporting hero is always irresistible. So that kind of charisma is a bit faded now.
So a few things that I got asked to do were reduce my nodding when in conversation.
We're back with Clifford Fleming, would-be politician, would-be charismatic, standing in a London park with that self-help book in hand. The news isn't great.
I don't think that little bits like that can actually make a massive difference. I had 1 week, and you can't really change your personality or the way you come across to people in a week. I think that's like, you need to explore yourself much more. It did, however, make me think more about the way I present myself, so it added to my self-reflection. I think that's a big thing, actually, like reflecting upon yourself and trying to improve the way you communicate is a big way you can become more charismatic. But I don't think any one technique or one little thing can massively help you improve your charisma.
Charisma is a nebulous thing. It can fade and be lost. It can be withdrawn by the audience. And there must be an audience. You can't be charismatic alone in a locked room. It's a trait that's difficult to describe, but you know it when you see it. You know it when you feel it.
Charisma's it's not about you. It's how you make them feel. There's this story that's told about William Gladstone and Benjamin Disraeli in, I believe it was somewhere around 1866 when they were running for the post of Prime Minister. And it just so happens that one young lady happened to be taken out to dinner on consecutive evenings by each man. And so naturally, the press asked her the next day what impressions the rivals had made upon her. And she said, after dining with Mr. Gladstone, I thought that he was the cleverest man in England. After dining with Mr. Disraeli, I thought I was the cleverest woman in England. And of course, Disraeli won the election. It's not how you make them feel about you so much as you make them feel about themselves.
BBC.
Hello, I'm Ashley Byrne with Sporting Witness on the BBC World Service, and I'm taking you back to the Olympic Games of 1948, when newly independent India won a historic gold medal by defeating the host nation Britain in the hockey final. I've been speaking to Balbir Singh, one of the stars of the Indian team, about his victory at what became known as the Austerity Games.
All through the night, the flame was carried by relays of Englishmen, and by Thursday morning, still accompanied by television newsreel, it had reached the outskirts of London. Crowds thronging the route to cheer the torchbearer, with his police escort and attendant runners, on their way to Wembley. And here, quite at home in the blazing heat of this glorious afternoon, are the Indian athletes.
The Indian athletes attending the 1948 Games in London were the first to do so since the country gained independence from Britain a year earlier. They'd won medals at previous Games, but this would be the first time they'd competed under their own flag. Then aged 23, Balbir Singh was in the hockey team selected to represent his country, which meant travelling thousands of miles from home to the country which had until just months before ruled India.
Of course, it was exciting to go to the capital city of the ex-masters. We were afraid of them when they were the rulers, but when I went there, they were very cordial. It was really strange for us because the Britishers, as rulers, they were very strict.
The 1948 Olympic Games in London were nicknamed the Austerity Games. Britain was struggling to rebuild itself after the Second World War, and food rationing was still in place. But Balbir remembers no such shortages for the athletes.
Although the entire Europe, or especially England, they were very austere as far as the Olympic kitchen was concerned. Everything was available from all parts of the world.
In the pastoral beauty of Richmond Park, with its ancient trees and its herds of grazing deer, a temporary home is being provided for over 1,500 visitors from overseas for this year's Olympic Games. And finishing touches are now being given to what is in effect a self-contained Olympic Games town. facilities for the preparation and cooking of a varied assortment of national dishes are provided in the spacious kitchens.
Although the food was okay, the sheer size of London took some getting used to for Balbir and his teammates.
Most of us was born in villages and saw a big city for the first time, although we had gone to Madras, Bombay and Bangalore, etc., Delhi. But London in those days was known as one of the biggest cities in the world, so going there it was something strange.
It was all a world away from rural India, where Balbir Singh's passion for hockey had started at a very young age.
I was born at a village, Haripur, near Philor. To my good fortune, the hockey ground of the school was only 3-4 yards in front of that house. That is why I started at age 5, started watching hockey players of the school playing the game. That is how hockey became my childhood love.
Balbir soon took up the challenge himself and found a real talent for it, eventually being selected to represent his country at the Games in London. And Balbir made quite an impact on his Olympic debut.
They played in 2 matches, and one was against Argentina. India won by 9-1. I scored 6 goals.
It was enough to help India to a place in the semi-finals against the Netherlands. They beat the Dutch 2-1, while in the other semi, Britain beat Pakistan, who were also competing in their first Olympics as an independent country. So the stage was set for a showdown between hosts Great Britain and India on the 12th of August 1948. 25,000 people packed into the Empire Stadium at Wembley, including, in the VIP box, the then Queen, who until just a few months earlier had been Empress of India. It wasn't long before the Indian team were overpowering the home side. Balbir remembers his coach telling him not to wait for the ball, but to chase it. He heeded that advice, and it paid off.
I scored the first 2 goals in 7th and 15th minute, and that is part of the history.
But it was a tough, rough and dirty game because the rain just wouldn't stop. The pitch became waterlogged, and to the shock of the home supporters, some of Balbir's teammates even took off their shoes.
Playing on wet and slippery ground, it was difficult to control the ball there, but the standard of the team was so good that we managed to play well on that ground.
As the Indian side bettered Great Britain, Balbir remembers how the home crowd gradually turned their support to the visitors.
We scored the 3rd and 4th, then most of the spectators there who belonged to that country, they started saying, "Come on India, make it half a dozen." So since then I have been saying that very, very sporting nation, although they were losing, they were trying to encourage and back Indian team.
It finished 4-0 to India. The former colony had beaten their former rulers on the hockey pitch to clinch the gold medal in their first Olympics as an independent country. And for Balbir, that meant victory was all the sweeter.
Honor to represent an independent India. Whatever was very, very pleasant and striking when we won the final, when the national anthem was played there, Indian national anthem, and the national flag, the tricolor, went high up above all other flags. I was feeling that I was also flying along with the flag, moving upwards in the sky.
And when Balbir and his teammates got home, they received a hero's welcome.
Garlands, garlands, garlands all around when we landed at Bombay, and red carpet, the entire city, all rejoicing. And then from Bombay we came to Punjab, all railway stations, jam-packed crowds and people garlanding everywhere.
Balbir says that Olympic victory in 1948 changed his life.
Because India won the Olympic Games in 1928, 32, 36, it became a national, sort of a national sport. Whatever I was in my life later, it was because of hockey. Hockey took me to different cities in the world, and even today I am honored wherever I go as a former hockey player, as former chief coach and manager of the Indian team. They respect me for that.
But in recent years, the Indian hockey team has not lived up to the standards set 64 years ago.
It is down these days, but I feel and wish, I always say it's my last wish, before I die, I would like the India team to win the Olympic gold medal once again.
I proclaim the closing of the games of the 14th Olympiad, and in accordance with tradition, I call upon the youth of every country in the world to assemble in 4 years at Helsinki, there to celebrate with us the games of the 15th Olympiad.
LBS Singh's success in London in 1948 was merely just the beginning of a long and glorious sporting career. In Helsinki, 4 years later, India mounted a successful defence of their title, defeating the Netherlands 6-1, while Beer scoring 5 of the goals, an individual scoring record in the Olympic Games hockey final, which has never been beaten. He captained India to a third consecutive gold at the Melbourne Games in 1956, with a 1-0 victory over Pakistan. And he continued playing until the early 1960s, before turning his talents to coaching. I'm Ashley Byrne, and that was a Made in Manchester production for Sporting Witness. You can subscribe to a weekly download of the programme. Just go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts and search for Sporting Witness.